really. Where's the gavel? I think
It's with your key.
I think Jay might have,
Yes,
or the church key also.
It's with the key, yeah.
All right. Seeing that we've got lots of people in our audience today. Oh, and Milsey too. All right, well, we're all ready, and you're all ready, and I'm presuming that some people may want to speak. Are you going to sit down now, Milsey? Okay, then. Great.
Are you going to turn your microphones on?
They're on.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, we're rolling. So,
Video, less for you guys.
yeah, it's more for the interwebs, all of our viewers. So, right now, I think we will take comments, and we'll try and keep them short, and we'll just start, and people can just come up, popcorn style, and we'll get through them. Who would like to start? All right, hey, Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Surbaugh here on behalf of the EDA, and I have 3 brief points to make today. In Cook County, we know that we've struggled with insufficient housing for 35 plus years. We know this because we've had 3 different housing studies done over the last 35 years, and all of them said that we had a housing deficit. The current need for housing is not a surprise, but we are finally poised to make a difference and address this longstanding challenge. Due to its size and infrastructure, especially the water and sewer, Grand Marais is both the greatest need and the greatest opportunity surrounding housing. The city is the largest center of commerce in the county, hosts the most jobs, and has the greatest demands for more housing. Fortunately, it is also the most equipped to support new housing, especially apartments. This public infrastructure, access to jobs, services, schools, and amenities, render it not only the most likely place in the county for an apartment project, but also the most cost-effective. The HRA was created in response to a community-wide recognition that our housing problem will not go away, and that unless we do something, the problem will soon become overwhelming. We recognize that the HRA has an opportunity to focus on housing and to finally make significant progress on this front. Now we have a chance to do just that in the community that needs it most. If we don't support this rezoning and ultimately the project here, we are not serious about tackling our housing problem, and we're wasting both time and resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Eric Humphrey, city resident and business owner. I stand in support of the rezoning and in support of this project. Like everybody knows, we need more housing for businesses to thrive. It's difficult for everybody to get workers, to get staff, and for even people who've lived here for a long, long time to stay here. So I stand in support.
Great, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Gail Anderson. I'm a Creechville resident. And I have some really severe concerns about the location of this apartment building. I'm all for workforce housing. I do know the community needs it. I'm just not happy with the selection of this location. One, because it's a really dangerous intersection. I've lived there for over 8 years. 5th Avenue West and the Gunflint Trail. It's on the curve of the trail. It's a blind curve. People come down the Gunflint Trail and come whipping through there extremely fast. And I voiced my concerns with Jason, and he said maybe they could put up some flashing signs and reduce the speed limit. But I know that signs aren't going to stop people from speeding through there. And I think this might be causing a real disaster. I'm really concerned about children that would be walking to school or biking to school, and I would not allow my child to cross that intersection unless you were to build a bridge over or dig under for a tunnel, because it would be severely dangerous. It's a blind corner, and it's not pedestrian friendly whatsoever. Also, I'd like to mention the jake braking, which I don't know if Anton's here, but oh, you're okay. I live at the top, so they start jake braking probably at Pincushion and come all the way down the hill and go past your place, I'm sure. And so I think it would be pretty mean and cruel to put an apartment building in that location and having those poor residents have to listen to that, because I guarantee you in the summertime, they won't be able to have their windows open facing the Gunflint. They will be miserable. And then the next thing you know, they'll be squawking, and you'll have to revamp the Gunflint Trail again, which would not be a good project. So I think that's really mean to set people up coming from out of town that have no clue what they're moving into and that are going to have a rude awakening once they move in there. I would love to see smaller homes in there, tiny homes, smaller residential houses, I think would be perfect. I think having possibly 100 people crossing that intersection right there on the curve is just not a good idea. I'm kind of stymied at why this location was chosen, but I have the feeling it was the cheapest. The land was free, and probably the infrastructure was the cheapest to connect to sewer and water, and I don't honestly think that's a valid reason over safety and over misery of the jake breaking to take that route. I don't understand why the 150 acres behind the dog park and behind the Birchwood Apartments isn't being looked at. To the left of the dog park, if you're looking at it, there's plenty of property between the treatment plant and the dog park to put in a road there. You could put in a road, build a beautiful building. It would be below the tree level. If you do it on the curve, this thing is going to stick out above the trees, and it's going to look like a wart. It's also on a scenic byway. So I don't understand that either. We don't have anything like this in our town. And why it's being proposed on one of the most beautiful scenic byways is kind of perplexing to me. I think there's a better choice of a location, and I don't think those locations have been explored enough. I know our HRA guy has only lived here for 10 months, but I think maybe if he were to try and do a little more digging, I asked why they couldn't go right behind the Birchwood Apartments, and he told me because the property's sloped. I really don't know what that means. Buildings are built on slopes all the time, so I was confused at what that response was about.
Okay.
Those are all my major grievances about it. I'm like with the concern, but let me reiterate: I know we need staff housing and affordable housing.
Right.
Also, putting that many people in one building doesn't make sense to me either. Law enforcement is already over their heads in problems, and if you're going to be putting people that are paying $500 a month with people who are paying $1,500 a month together, that'd be an interesting project. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
All right.
That's what
Thanks,
I
Gail.
think.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yep. All right. Anybody else? Ann.
Good evening. I'm Ann Sullivan, and I'm here today in support of the change to R1 or residential housing for this particular property. I want to step back in time. Obviously, I've been a part of the HRA and active in the EDA. I'm familiar with all the housing studies that have been done. But I want to take a step back in time to when I moved here and my son moved here, and just share a story. My son was in his 30s upon moving to Grand Marais, got hired by ISD 166, and was able to find some housing. But once the tourist season hit, he was asked to vacate his home and came back in his 30s to live with mom and dad. The following 3 years, he did the same thing. It repeated over and over and over again. And had it not been for one of Anna Hamilton's rentals, he probably would still be returning every summer to our residence. I'd welcome him always with open arms. But he has looked for housing. He has connected with a variety of people in the community and has been unable, without that one connection, to find anything affordable for a decade. So his story is one that's been repeated over and over and over again. And if we're going to continue to have young people who want to live here, raise families here, we have to have some housing. So again, I support the change to the R1 zoning for this particular parcel. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Good evening. James Jorke. I'm a Grand Marais resident at 821 West 3rd Street. I'm here to speak in support of the zoning change. Newsflash, we need more housing. And this is something that I've seen in my work for the county as we try to recruit people to come to Cook County to work and live. The absence of affordable housing is always the biggest thing that prevents people from landing here. In long term, that's just not sustainable. We need more housing, and we need housing that is accessible to people who want to work and live here. This project would provide a great opportunity for that, and I strongly support the effort to do this project and to change the zoning to accommodate that. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Anyone else?
Good evening. Linda Jurek, Executive Director for the Cook County Chamber of Commerce. I just want to say right up front, one of the legislative priorities for the Cook County Chamber during this session is really working on the housing here in Cook County, and not just Grand Marais, all of Cook County. And as we've had a strong leader in the voice for housing, and that is Jason Hale, our new director, I think it's brilliant that we created an HRA and that we have somebody so well-versed and well-educated in building homes to lead us through this. What I do know is change is hard. You know, I'm a lifelong person who's lived here forever, but I spent 30 years in Duluth. I was born in this hospital. I ran these streets of Grand Marais when I was a little tyke. I didn't get a bus ride 5 blocks to school. I mean, we walked to school. So lots of changes. Changes is hard. I just want to really say up front that I'm very, very much in support of this change. However, I was very intrigued at some of the things that Gail said. That said, I know that if I sat down and I talked to the leadership in obtaining this land, that those things have probably been thought about, I would hope, and know that I'm going to ask those same questions, because I think they are. Some of those are, interesting questions. Not that it should ever stop the project. I understand the cost of infrastructure. I understand that we need to build within the city of Grand Marais to be able to defray some of those costs in conquering our housing dilemma here in Cook County. So I am in support of the rezoning and representing the chamber. It's one of our initiatives once again, and I stand in support. Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, anyone?
Hello, I'm Marais Somnis. I am currently serving as the chair of the HRA board, and so, of course, I am here in support of the request to amend the zoning to allow residential use on the property that the city has deeded to the HRA for this purpose. If I remember correctly, the most recent housing study says we need 500 to 600 units of housing in Cook County. And I can tell you that a few years ago when I worked at the EDA and we built some apartments in Lutzen, my email and phone and at the grocery store and the post office, everyone was saying to me, "When are you going to build apartments in Grand Marais?" Well, with any luck at all, we're going to break ground this year on some apartments. And it's phenomenal that although Jason's only been in this job since April, that we've progressed to the point where we're having this conversation. I never thought that we would get this far this fast. So it's a great opportunity, and I request that you support the request to amend the zoning. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mary.
I am Chris O'Brien. I'm also here today as a board member of the HRA. I was very excited to be named to be a commissioner on the HRA, just because it's so widely recognized in the community that the housing shortage is one of the most serious issues that we have in the community. So the ability to contribute something to helping to solve that problem was something that was pretty appealing to me. I think I've heard many stories of foregone jobs, that things that the jobs that remain empty because people have come and they've been excited about the job, but they can't find housing. So it's a very real issue. I think we all recognize that. I was very pleasantly surprised when Jason brought this proposed project to the board as a potential project that would make a very quick and a significant dent in the housing shortage that we were talking about. I think I was impressed. I think that it's the current climate for developers is very unfavorable, and so I think that there are a lot of headwinds for developers who are looking to make a successful project, including rising interest rates, and there's a lot of so I think that what is unusual here is that we have such a supportive collaboration between the folks in the private sector, the folks in the government, to try to address this housing project in spite of those headwinds. So I think that that's something that is important. I think it's important to recognize too that the specific decision that we're talking about today is a rezoning decision for the project. It's not. I think that the process. We're still early in the process. There will be opportunities to, review, and I'm confident. And as a commissioner, I'm committed to make sure that the project addresses the safety issues that were raised earlier, any potential environmental issues. But those are later in the process of it. But I think at this point, I'm would encourage you to go to move forward with the rezoning decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else?
Good evening.
Chris.
Chris Lindhom. I live on the west side of Grand Marais. I'm a resident here, but I'm also the school district superintendent. And I'm here tonight just to not necessarily voice an opinion on this particular issue, but to highlight just how acute housing shortages are. We've been running without filled positions nonstop for 2 years straight, housing being the number one issue that has kept us from being able to attract employees, especially affordable homes or apartments. In a recent conference, I shared with some colleagues that the district is in a unique position where we actually have 27 acres that we're talking very seriously with the HRA about helping to contribute to a solution in housing. But I might be the only superintendent in Minnesota that's actually thinking about becoming a landlord, so that when we hire a teacher, we can give them some temporary housing and leveraging that property to be able to do something like that. I don't know of a colleague in Minnesota that is exploring that. It's taking place in places like Vale and other places that are very heavy in tourism, but not in Minnesota. So to paint the picture of how acute that is, that conversation is very real, and Mr. Hale has been speaking with our school board a couple of different times about looking into that. So whatever we can do to alleviate some of that acute housing shortage, the district benefit from it, not just with employees, but obviously any students that move into the district and add to our population. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else before we call it to a close?
I'm Mark Oltean. I'm a Creechville resident. Approximately the northeast section of that lot we're speaking of.
Okay.
Lived there approximately 15, 20 years. I forget. I understand the housing shortage up here. I've been up here now for a little over 30 years. I didn't have indoor plumbing for the first 10 of those years. I understand it, and I understand, the needs for families, for units for families. But we got to be smart about where we put them. I think if you're putting a housing complex there, you're just piling more people on top of an already congested area. Now, I'm against this for quite a few reasons. One of them is a couple times a year I like to walk around that section of woods, and you know, it's nice and peaceful. You get to see the wildlife in that, and we're running out of those spots around the city limits. And this is not only is it a hazard for more vehicles in that area, because I guarantee you there's going to be more accidents and more serious accidents, because it's already a dangerous section. People do not obey the speed limit there, and it's just going to get worse. Not only that, the more cement we put in that area, you know, small homes, I can understand that. Put some small units in there with yards. The more pavement we have there, we already have flooding issues in that section of the, right at the top of the hill, there's flooding issues where it starts. Every spring they have issues there. The more cement we put there, the more it's gonna be a problem, and the more I'm gonna be in trouble from it. But everybody downhill is gonna suffer from it. The more pavement, you know, we just don't have, the drainage the sewer system set up now is not enough to handle what we have now. And that's a brand new system. And the storms are not gonna get better. They're just gonna get worse. We're gonna get more downfall. I only had a couple hours to think of these things. Well, and another thing is, geez, you know, people, I'm surprised nobody from the Gunflint Trail's here, because, boy, that'd be the first thing they see going up the trail, and the last thing they see when they're leaving their nice vacation is, bam, you know, welcome back to civilization with the big old apartment complex. And, you know, like it or not, since that new Gunflint was put in, that area, that whole area, I told you I walked around there. Like it or not, I think it turned into a wetland, because that's wet most of the summertime. So, you know, if anybody could tell me how to file a thing to claim that as a wetland, I'd really appreciate it. But if this goes ahead, I'm gonna pursue it, because I don't think it was thought out. There's so many other places, and it's not pedestrian friendly. I don't drive. I live up there. We got bus service 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, 4 days if there's a holiday. And good luck trying to bicycle down and back up. Good luck trying to walk down and walk back up. So whoever's going to live in that complex is going to have a vehicle. So pedestrian friendly, supposedly, we're supposed to be getting in, and bike friendly, that's out of the window up there.
All right.
And it's just a dangerous section of road. Man, and the more congestion, I think it's just going to be, I guarantee there's going to be problems.
All right, Mark.
I hate
Yeah.
to be not in my backyard, because I understand the problem, but let's be smart about the solution. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mark. Okay, anyone else? Going once, going twice, and Millsy.
Good evening. Thank you. Dave Mills. My address is 196 County Road 44, but I own the parcels of 800 Creechville Road as well as 820 Creechville Road. My daughter was born in the house of 800 Creechville Road. We had a home birth. We had no running water. My wife was pre-diabetic with my son, so we couldn't have a home birth for my son. But I'll tell you, we raised both kids in Creechville, right on the Gunflint Trail, up until about 5 years ago. When did we buy that? 2006, 2005, something like that. Yeah, the neighbors in Creechville are raising a lot of valid concerns, all of which I think should be addressed. The issue before y'all today is whether or not to rezone it. Not whether or not to build an apartment complex, but whether or not we want any housing on this parcel. I have plenty of concerns and reservations about larger scale developments there, and I think we can work through those and talk through those. I've raised my concerns with Director Hale, and he has some pretty excellent answers, I'd say. And I can get on board with some of those ideas, but still, I do have concerns. But as previously said, our biggest challenge in this community is housing. We need to do anything and everything we can to try to do that. We need to do it in a safe way. We need to do it in a very responsible way. And I don't think that whatever happens there is going to be done irresponsibly or without a whole lot of scrutiny and thought. Because, I mean, here we all are doing just that for just the rezoning, not for a specific project. So as I go through the city's land use guide plan, looking at where this project falls in all that, I think it checks a lot of the boxes. And there could be some boxes left unchecked, but by and large, I think it fills it. So I just hope that as you consider this, just remember, this is just about zoning change. There is talk about what will happen next, but that's talk at this point. So that's a lot simpler way to look at it. Maybe it's putting some blinders on a little bit, but I think it's important to look at it that way, just to parse things out one step at a time, address issues as they come up. If there's housing built there, I don't know if it'll be any more dangerous. Again, like I said, raised my kids there, very wary of the road. We've had 3 cats die on the road, 0 kids die on the road. But we're sensitive to that. I still have PTSD from the Jake breaking, trying to get my daughter to sleep. Impossible. Oh man, never been more angry in my life. But she's all right. She's actually doing great. And I'm okay. Whether or not there's housing there, it's still going to be a dangerous area, and we do need to address that. I don't think putting housing there is going to make it any more dangerous. It might increase odds, but it might just be an impetus for us to do something to fix that, because it needs fixing. Also, I just note, one thing I disagreed with is just the pedestrian side of things. We're hoping to have a path run all along up the Gunflint Trail from the highway up to 5th Avenue West, and then go down to the recycle center. And there are loads and loads and loads of people who walk that every day. A lot of pedestrians already there, and I think that's going to improve safety greatly. Also, I worked at a restaurant downtown for 10 years. Every night after work, I'd bike up that hill, straight up. And the first time I couldn't, the second time I couldn't, the third time I did. So it's doable. It just takes a little, practice and stamina and muscle building. But it was good for me. But I think there could be some improvements to our pedestrian infrastructure as well. So thank you for considering this. Thank you for all your hard work. Not easy decisions, not easy work. And I believe in you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, anyone else? Going once, going twice. All right, sold. Well, seeing that Jason is here, would you like to come up and address the commission?
Would you like me to come up with this?
I think it would make sense at this point.
Well, does it make sense to read the letters that we received as well as part of the public comment?
For the record,
Do you want to do that for the record and then?
It
Yeah, why don't
seems
we can
appropriate
put
to
that in
me.
the record first and then do that. Are you getting that?
You want Jason, for us to ask questions of Jason, or?
Oh, I thought, well, since we've heard and people are talking, might as well, especially just given the circumstances, unless you feel that's not necessary. You want to get out of here? I don't know.
Does anybody want to read them? Do you want me to read them? Somebody else want to read?
We can read
I'll
them.
read Ben's. You want to read the next one?
Sure.
Okay. This is from Ben Silence. We got this this morning. Ben Silence says, to whom it may concern, I have a few concerns about the proposed complex on Fifth Avenue. One, is there adequate water pressure at the fire hydrants to be able to effectively fight a fire without having to shuttle water? Two, the traffic in the area during the morning rush to school is already chaotic. To add possibly another 100 cars and people to that area will cause problems. Three, to add to that many people to the population of town will put more of a strain on an already stressed emergency services. And four, to add to the already barely adequate public utilities will cost the taxpayers for upgrades while deferring the costs away from the actual owners of the complex. Ben Silence, taxpayer and fire chief.
And the other letter dated February 15th. This is from Doug and Mary Sanders. For several years, Mary and I, Doug, have supported efforts for affordable housing in Grand Marais and Cook County, including 1, the city recent rezoning of the larger home sites for affordable housing, 2, campaigning for city and county officials who are supportive of this effort, 3, promotion and retaining Jason Hale to head up their new HRA, and 4, financial support for survey of the 12 acres of land north of the hospital intended for the construction of an apartment building. We understand that a portion of these apartments will be designated for affordable housing. The need for affordable housing and just additional housing in this community has been recognized for years. This apartment building is the most significant step in meeting this need. I, Mary, as North Shore Health Board member, have direct knowledge of this need. Just a few days ago, we had a conversation at the dog park with a friend of a Cook County school teacher who couldn't afford to stay in the community and moved away. We asked that your commission rezone the specified city's 12-acre lot as acceptable for an apartment building. I think there was one more somewhere that.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, where was the? Oh, yeah, right. I got this one. This is dated February 9th. This is from Jacob and Elizabeth Davis. Please accept this letter in lieu of attendance as our formal opposition to the rezoning effort and question at the foot of the Gunflint Trail. The land in question is currently zoned in a fashion that reflects the true value and potential of the land. It should not be rezoned. It should remain recreational, and if development occurs, it should be developed for recreational purposes only. The following points need to be addressed before considering the rezoning change. How will increased traffic at Fifth Avenue and Gunflint Trail be managed safely? This intersection is already blocked by natural features, decreasing reaction times for vehicles coming down the trail into town and for those crossing. 2, how will any development mitigate the destruction of the waterway that exists along the west of Fifth Avenue West? There is year-round marshland that soaks up discharge from the hill behind town. How will the development impact the hydrology of the hillside without negatively impacting life and property below? How will rezoning and development of this parcel mitigate the degradation of forest and the creation of light pollution at the base of the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway? We have resided in the Creechville neighborhood since 2017, and the proposed multifamily development that would result from this rezoning effort represents a clear detriment to the aesthetic and quality of life in this quiet neighborhood. This development is not in step with the values and vision of a rural community. Further, we don't believe the proposed development plan from the HRA will create affordable housing. How will the proposed development be made affordable for the service industry without subsidization? If this development goes forward with a private entity executing the plan, how can we be reassured that the price point will reflect a fair value that would have to be lower than the currently unaffordable market value of housing in this community? We hope the Planning Commission decides on this matter in a conservative fashion that keeps Grand Marais from overdevelopment. Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. Jacob and Elizabeth Davis. All right, commissioners.
Now public comment is over.
Well,
Or not.
I just want to say for the record, I received a phone call late this afternoon from a
Okay.
Jim Ramble. I encouraged him to submit his comments by email, but he was concerned that the city staff wouldn't get them by the time of the meeting since it was so late in the day. So I'm just going to make note, in case you do have an email, you can put it in the record that he called. He's our resident at the end of the Gunflint Trail, and
Okay.
he was concerned, opposed to the rezoning for an apartment building.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, commissioners, I was going to invite Jason up to make comment, but if you don't think that's necessary, we can just go right ahead with our work. Any?
I guess if we have questions for Jason.
I'd like to hear from him.
Yep. Okay. All right. Jason, you want to come up?
Sure.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioners. Did you have questions? I mean, there was a lot discussed, obviously, and there's a lot that I don't have specific answers to yet because there's
Yeah.
still, we don't have a plan for the building or anything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Brandon, did you have something you wanted to ask specifically?
Well, it would mostly have been what plans are for that area if it was to be rezoned. Is it supposed to be more Section 8? Is it supposed to be, there were rumors flying around of yet another elderly person's home. What plans for the area actually were that are, in motion? What are you guys actually working on?
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. So what I can tell you to date is the plans, actually this has been, we've been very public about the conversation that's been going on. I think I've been on WTIP 3 or 4 times talking about this. The plan is currently to explore a 50, it's been reduced by 1, a 50-unit building there that is going to be workforce and market rate housing. Beyond that, there's no site plan, there's no specific building design. Part of the reason is because despite the rain we recently had, there's still a good amount of snow on the property, and we have to wait till that melts to do a wetland delineation and see what the property actually looks like in the spring season. We don't know where a building can go, where a house can go for that matter, until we get on the property and look and do boring samples to see compact soils and to really figure out what makes sense on that property, whether it's a 50-unit apartment structure or it's a tiny home. We have to do some of that due diligence. So there's a big enough piece of property there. It's approximately 12 acres that we're pretty confident we can place the building somewhere that's buffered and appropriate, but I don't have specific answers on where yet because we don't know. But to answer your earlier point, there is no conversation to date about Section 8. And just this probably is useful for folks to know as we're talking about housing. Public housing is no longer a thing. It's a former type of housing that was built by the federal government or by programs. Section 8 are vouchers typically that tenants bring with them to apartments. So from my perspective, if this building and the landlord and ownership allowed Section 8 tenants, that just means that they would offer X number of apartment units to allow for Section 8 vouchers to receive those vouchers. So it gets a little muddy, but I think it's important to distinguish. Today, how it usually works, there's either a place-based, so the building has them built in, or the tenant holds them and they try to find a place to live that accepts those vouchers. But as of right now, that is not the model that the developer builds for. That's not what they're considering, and principally because of the cost implications for that. So does that answer your questions? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Great.
Why did you choose that particular location?
Well, several reasons, Commissioner. One, as someone alluded to earlier, I think it was Ms. Anderson, the price was right, and there are enough complications in getting folks, frankly, to come up here to build anything. So to the extent that we can make it easier for them to say yes, that's part of my job. The other thing is size implication, and the other thing, maybe a controversial statement, is the location. It is, if we put 50 units anywhere in town, in any neighborhood, neighborhoods will be upset. It's too many people, it's too close to the traffic concerns, the same concerns will come up no matter where we put anything bigger than a house or a duplex. And I'm not saying that that's not a valid concern to bring up for folks, totally understand it. I'm just saying part of the reason that this was appealing is because it really is on the bookend of a residential neighborhood and away from, it's not smack dab in the middle of an existing neighborhood. It's on the end of a neighborhood. There's still people that will be impacted there. I'm not trying to, say that that's not the case. but the location has utilities on the road. There's a truck route that's designed for heavy traffic use right there in the Gunflint, and and proximity to the hospital, to downtown, to the county, to major employment centers makes sense in a lot of ways. The final thing is, frankly, space. Finding a parcel big enough to actually hold a multifamily structure of any size is pretty difficult. It's either public land and Forest Service it's already been built on, or it is wetlands. So this was an opportunity where it made sense, it was available, it was publicly owned, and this is how a lot of these things actually happen. Any other questions about that?
Not for me currently.
Thank you for the question.
Any other commissioners have questions for Jason?
Well, and I don't know if this is the format or whatever, but like, I think, the task at hand is the rezoning, right, has been mentioned, right? I mean, this is the rezoning. Do we want residential use on the parcel at all, right? I could probably use a refresher from Mike on what R1 allows without conditional use and all of those, to make sure that there are some stopgaps for the public once again to become involved in the process of whether or not they want to see a large-scale apartment building or not.
Well, and that's part of R1, that's what we established, that we want
That's an
to
allowable use.
Yeah, it's sort of like when we were talking about, allowing more uses along 61 coming in. It was the R1 uses that we were putting in there.
But in a slightly different
Yeah.
configuration, that an apartment building would require a conditional use permit in R1.
Okay. That's helpful.
And
Yeah.
when we redid the zoning standards, we have specific standards for
Yep.
small apartment buildings, large apartment buildings. So they still have to, whatever
Oh, yeah.
gets proposed has to go by the zoning ordinance that we
Yeah.
just updated and agreed to not that long ago.
What could be done without coming back for special permission is single and duplex. But on 12 acres, you're not going to do that without subdividing. So there really isn't anything that can happen here that's not going to come back for more discussion.
Because they're not going to build one house on 12 acres. They're going to spend them.
I would.
Mr. Moneybags there.
I think the city council would probably be pretty disappointed in that.
Not quite what we had in mind, but, all right.
I guess the only other question is, I guess at this time, Jason, is, what do you, what is the response to the concerns about the dangerous conditions that exist there already, and are there anything in the works? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this, and so how do we solve that? And then the other question, and then I'll defer to whomever else, but is when we rezone something to residential R1, what are the expectations from the city standpoint in providing additional fire hydrant, water service, sidewalks? Like, what is it that we're actually implicitly approving, right? And so that's my question.
Well, I mean, part of that is we have a lot of R1 that, as you know, doesn't have any infrastructure in it. So there's no commitment on our part, at least as far as the infrastructure goes, to do anything more than what's already.
I do know that I've experienced in trying to, with just not rezoning, but in doing a subdivision, or like, I actually had requirements to put in, the city didn't have to do it. I had to pay to do new hydrants. And so I'm assuming the project would, much like whatever, I don't know what size the mains are for sewer or water, honestly. I don't know if I ever looked at Fifth Avenue West and looking at that stuff. But anyway, obviously, I'd assume that would either fall on the developer and through the developer's agreement, right, which is many, many, many steps down the line, right? We're at the point of, do we want, housing? And so that, again, would be a condition that would be put out. And it's very well, the HRA might come to the city, maybe it's not us, right? They might come to the Utilities Commission or the City Council to say, we want you guys to chip in this part of it. But that's not now, right? That's I wouldn't see like us saying we can allow residential in this area to say like, cool, now we're gonna go ahead and fund, foot the bill on infrastructure or whatever it needs for this to happen at this point, right?
So that's not an assumption
I don't
you would
think,
make.
I wouldn't make that assumption. I mean, I don't know why.
We're
it
not
would be-
making that assumption either. So, just so you know.
Good.
Yeah. That would be quite the assumption if they were. I mean, I don't, so.
Commissioner, just, you had asked a question about safety, just
Yeah.
to close the gap on that. I actually talked with the county engineer this morning about that intersection, about his opinion about what we could do. And as someone had previously spoken to, there are some traffic calming and awareness measures we can take, of course. There's nothing we can do against people not obeying the speed limit or, whipping around that corner or whatever. Like, that's not something that the project can do. But having said that, as far as the implications to increased vehicle traffic, this came up, from what I understand, at 5th and 5th when that project was done at that intersection, and then further at Gunflint and 5th. There were some temporary four-way stops put in while work was being done the last several years. The traffic counts in this county just don't warrant signalization, which is why we don't really have many signals, except for 61. This is according to the county engineer, and there is plenty of capacity at that intersection to handle more traffic. And the reality is, even if of the 50 units, even if there was 100 cars, they're not coming and going at the same exact time. Think about, even if all of them left in one day, that's over a 12 to 16 hour period that they would be coming and going. So he was not concerned. He knew that, there's more to be talked about for sure about how we can make sure that that's as safe as possible. At the end of the day, 50 plus cars, anywhere is 50 plus cars, we're going to have to figure, they're going, regardless of where you put this, there's going to be traffic implications. But the fact that it's on a truck route that is designed for heavier traffic is better than some alternatives, I'll say it that way. So we are definitely aware of that.
Okay. All right. Anything more, commissioners or Jason, before we move on? All right, moving on. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners. Had a lot of comments. Does anybody have a strong feeling at this moment and would like to?
Does anybody have any more discussion? Are we gonna talk about anything else?
Yeah. That's
Do I
what this is,
Do I have
man.
to go first?
You can go first, since you're going first.
All right. I'll bring up a couple things, I think. Obviously, like the majority of the folks here are for this rezoning, and I think listening to what Gail had to say and what Mark, I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name. Oltean, all right. I think I'll speak to those, at least not in a not to placate, but at least in my understanding of how I feel like what our job is here tonight, and also for what I understand about some of those things. I do, Gail, first thing, ped crossing, I think that that's an important thing. That is a tough corner. I feel like I live in Creechville as well, and I've actually probably, most of the accidents I've almost gotten into at that intersection is actually people blowing through, like they think the old Gunflint Trail is still the old Gunflint Trail, and they blow through that stop sign.
I know two people that have been T-boned.
Yeah, and so it's the opposite direction, right, of what we're talking about coming down. But I do know that, I'm not on the city council anymore, but when I was, a part of our pedestrian plan that the Active Living Steering Committee has worked on is actually a sidewalk on the south side of the Gunflint Trail above the school woods there. That'll connect in with that new section from Steve Sports up to Great Expectations they did this fall, and it'll actually continue around law enforcement all the way and then down. I think somebody maybe brought that up, but then down onto 5th to get to which I think is awesome. I live there and I see people every day, all day long, maybe not today, but when it's not super icy, right? People are out there using that. So I think getting people off the highway is really important. And maybe that doesn't address the crossing idea of it, but even the fact that if there was a sidewalk that you could cross to, even painted stripes that people understand it is a crosswalk, right? I absolutely agree with both of you that, 40 miles an hour is that's never maintained. Some people maintain it, but it's very rare, right? Everybody goes super fast. So that makes me a little bit nervous. I do agree, noise is an issue, and like, that wasn't me. There was some other people, and I happened to be the one that had to try and communicate with the sheriff about that, play liaison on that, and got everybody that drove a truck in the county to show up and yell at me about it, but, I understand.
Very well.
Yeah. I understand it, and I think it is part of, what, I don't know, I guess, if they end up getting more calls about it, then, they'll end up getting more calls about it, and they'll probably get the same answer that my neighbors got about, well, we don't have the capabilities to try and enforce it, but they get to live here, they get to be here. One of the biggest things that I feel is that density is like a key solution for affordability. And so I think that having a 12-acre parcel that the city does, and the ability to have infrastructure nearby, we can't find our way out of this housing thing with 5-acre minimums and private wells and septics. Like, in the city core is where the solution has to come from, I think. I totally agree with you, Mark, like walking through the woods. I walk 9th, runs out ties into Nature Boy. I walk that every single day, and I love it, and I know it's someday that's going to be gone, especially if what the superintendent, when Chris was speaking about the city, the school land, potentially being involved with HRA getting turned into something. Yeah, I get it, but I will miss that, I guess, if that goes away. But I also think it's for the betterment of our community to have more people, to have more kids in the schools. We, right next to the Hamilton Housing, cleared a lot, right? That's what I look at every morning when I walk out of my room and making coffee, is this house that Hamilton Housing bought. And it's like, oh, I should have bought that lot so that nobody could live there. But it's like, well, what does that do? You know what I mean? Like, that, we live in town. We live in town. If you don't want that, not saying, I'm hearing what you're saying, right? But I'm saying, we live in town, and when you live in Creechville, it's kind of like this, it's kind of nice, right? Because we still have the woods, and we can walk 2 blocks and be in the woods, be on state land, and be out in it, And I actually look at it more like, I'd love to have more people to have that opportunity to feel that kind of borderline of like being in town, the comforts and the accessibility to being right in town, but still that feeling of being kind of right on the edge. So I think I kind of, I don't know anything about scenic byway stuff. I don't know. I guess I didn't hear anything from the Gunflint Trail. Mark, your points about impervious surfaces, wetland delineation, knowing what I know and just being a builder, like, it's not easy to just go and do stuff. And even like if they buy wetland credits, that's not an easy thing to do. So I think the steps that come out of our agreement to turn this into, if we decide to do that, into R1 zoning, it's really up then to the HRA to try and work through the process of the different regulatory bodies to make sure that they're doing it right and to doing a good job. I'd imagine, even like in the business park, there's stormwater catchment that has to happen on every project that happens up there. There's plenty of folks here that can attest to what that process is like and what that adds to the cost of a project, but it's also making that Cedar Grove Business Park function better because those are actually being implemented now. And they don't have the same issues that they had early on with stormwater issues up there because those things are now in place. And I would guarantee you that that's going to happen on this piece of property. So, I think I guess those are some of my, I guess, listening to you guys speak and what your concerns are. I'm not saying like, those are all valid concerns, but I think that what I brought up are things that like I know are in place and I trust those systems to work. And I also think that if we allow this to be switched over to R1, when they're actually able to take a look at the land, meet with their engineers, meet with their developers, that number is already dialed back from what that initial size was of, I think, the apartment complex. It's already scaled back some. we'll see what that ends up. I mean, I think when we originally were approached by the HRA, when I was on the city council, there was talk about multifamily, like apartment idea, but then also like the pocket neighborhood or kind of the cottage neighborhood thing that you brought up, Gail, small houses. And I would hope that there would actually be room on both of those, on that property, on that 12 acres to do both those things, and maybe not, but, we only have 7% publicly held land in the county, and, there's a lot of woods, there's a lot of places to get out and enjoy things, and I think that the only way that we can survive as a community is to like have people here, have our schools full, and, I think, again, it can't be everybody having 5 acres in a private system to function and make it affordable for everybody. I think it's going to take some density within the city limits of Grand Marais to make it happen, so that's my diatribe.
All right, thanks, Anton. Anybody else that'd like to make comments? Commissioners?
I drove Karen out.
Oh, there she goes. Okay.
I guess I want to echo Anton's comments. When we decided to redo our zoning ordinance, and we were looking at density, we recognized we needed to make areas more dense, available, so we can provide more housing opportunities. I don't remember how many years ago, but Creechville used to be the commercial recreational up there too. We rezoned portions up there because we had requests come before us to make them residential.
Exactly.
And we had this discussion at that time that we said, well, that area is developing in a residential area. We left out the city property, and because we just didn't think about it back then. And now we need to remember that tonight we're voting on making it residential. We're not voting for an apartment building, and we're not approving anything yet. And I'm confident in the zoning code that was passed. We made it a conditional use. We have all these things in place that says, we think if that area fits for an apartment building, it should be considered. Come up with a plan, bring it to us. Does it meet all our requirements that we spent hours coming up with and trying to make that determination? So I understand the concerns of the neighborhood, definitely do. I don't know if an apartment building is going to fit there. But I'm confident in what the work we've done over the past few years to at least explore the option. And if it's not an apartment building, maybe it's duplexes, maybe it's the courtyard. I don't know. It's not my field of expertise, but I guess I'm confident that our HRA board, our HRA director, will understand the concerns of the community and bring forth a plan that addresses all the things that we say, yeah, those are concerns. So I just want to remind this board, we're only voting saying that area really is more appropriate for residential than commercial.
All right.
Yeah, I would just add that, actually, it's nothing to add, but I absolutely agree with the local community and the people that live in that area and seeing changes like that, it's really going to be a little bit of a tough conversation when we start talking about the apartment building itself, for me, right? Like, it just is. And so, I don't think anybody expects that, Jason, to be easy, right? Like, we're gonna have those conversations and get through those details, but we can't turn away from 12 acres and the possibility of housing, right? Like, we just can't do that either. So, I would put a motion that we support the rezoning to R1.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion?
You've got a series of findings now.
Oh, no, I know.
Good.
I have those. Well, I would like to say I agree with much of what the commissioners have said here, and I also lived in Creechville, so I have a sense of where this is and what it would mean. I do think, and I was racking my brains to try and remember, I think we just left that piece out because it just seemed natural. Like, there's Fifth Avenue coming up, and it just seemed like a natural split. I don't really remember having anything more than that in mind when we did that.
The request actually was to rezone the other side of the road because it had been left out of the original residential zoning, even though it was developed residentially. And it's that section line again that runs just east of the Gunflint.
Okay.
Where the recreation commercial zoning went right to the section line, and there was a whole row of houses on the east side of the Gunflint were zoned recreation commercial.
All right. Well, I guess going on, looking at our findings here. The first item to be considered is the proposed zoning shall be consistent with the comprehensive land use plan adopted by the city. Looking over that, I feel like it does, address the types of housing that they're looking for, different types of housing, that type of thing. We know that we need more. There's obviously pressure from within to try and come up with something more than what we have. And we're not directly here saying what it's going to be, but we know we need more housing, and one of the things that we said we were going to do is come up with different, I'm not exactly sure, but like senior housing and family housing and all that kind of stuff.
Community goal, ensure access to affordable life cycle housing for all
There we
people.
go, lifestyle housing, yeah. So I feel like that is addressed there. And then the second one, it says a mistake has been made in the original zoning, which was inconsistent with the comprehensive or land use plan, which should now be corrected along with the zoning, or substantial changes have occurred in the community since the adoption of the comprehensive or land use plan, which should result in the plans and the zoning being amended. I feel like the latter is really what we're looking at here. Things have substantially changed. I mean, as we saw when we changed the zoning right next door.
And I think maybe the biggest physical change is the Gunflint Trail was rerouted, creating this little island section.
Right. So with that change plus the pressure from the housing that we needed and people just building houses anyway and moving, I think that's addressed there. The third, there shall exist a clear public need for a benefit from additional zoning of the type proposed, which shall be above and beyond any benefit or convenience to the landowners. Well, that's obviously what we're talking about here with housing and employee housing specifically. And then 4, beyond a public need being evident, there shall be a showing that the public interest would be best served by resuming the property in question rather than other property in the community. Certainly looking at that piece, its size is part of the reason why it'd be a good choice. Its location, it has, like, as we've talked about, it already has utilities running in there, so it would be a good place to have a little more R1. So that being our findings, I would put it forward to a vote. All those in favor of rezoning this section to R1, vote aye.
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 All opposed? All right, passes. We will send this to the council.
Did you want to do a roll call?
That was part of the consent agenda.
Did you vote that?
We skipped it.
Yeah, I don't remember voting on
We
that
had all
one.
these people, we might as well just start having people talk, if that's what they wanted to.
I got excited.
Just do it.
Thanks for finishing on time.
Wow, on time.
You said
We had a time.
7:30. She said 6:30.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.